Tonight, we're going to talk about something you were never meant to hear, something buried deep beneath layers of secrecy, deception, and silence. The CIA, the most powerful intelligence agency in the world, launched a covert mission that not only failed, but shook the very foundation of global trust. You won't hear this on mainstream news, but it's time you know what really happened. Because when powerful institutions operate without accountability, freedom is always the first casualty. Tucker Carlson, and this story will change how you see the world. Something strange is happening, and nobody in power wants to talk about it. You've probably noticed how every time a major government mission goes wrong, the first thing they do is change the subject. They flood the airwaves with distractions, scripted outrage, and expert panels that all seem to agree before the conversation even starts. But behind all the noise, something deeper is happening. This isn't just about a single failure. It's about a system built on the illusion of competence. The CIA, the very agency designed to protect America's interests, has quietly become an institution that protects itself. When things go wrong, no one takes responsibility. When truth comes out, it's labeled classified. And when you ask questions, you're told you don't understand the bigger picture. But maybe the problem is that they don't want you to. Because if you did, you might realize just how much power is being used without your consent. Every empire throughout history has had one thing in common: secrecy. The more a government hides, the less it serves. The CIA's secret mission wasn't just a mistake. It was a symptom of something larger: unaccountable power. When an agency can act without oversight, without transparency, and without consequences, that's not intelligence, that's arrogance. And arrogance is dangerous. It blinds people in power to reality. It convinces them they're untouchable. That's how missions fail, and that's how trust collapses. Because you can't have faith in a system that lies to you. You can't believe in leaders who refuse to tell you the truth. Every time they classify information, every time they silence whistleblowers, every time they bury evidence, they're not protecting you. They're protecting themselves. And let's be honest. If a mission is truly in the interest of national security, why does it collapse under public scrutiny? Why do they panic when sunlight hits the facts? Because truth exposes weakness. It shows you who's making the decisions, what motivates them, and how little they actually care about accountability. And here's the irony. The people inside these agencies are some of the smartest in the world. But intelligence without integrity is just manipulation. You can't fix a broken system by pretending it's working. You fix it by confronting it directly, loudly, and unapologetically. When this mission went wrong, it wasn't an accident. It was the result of decisions made by people who believed they were above consequences. And when powerful people believe that everyone else pays the price, soldiers, civilians, taxpayers, ordinary people who never had a say in any of it, they'll call it an unfortunate event. They'll blame bad intel. They'll move on. But you can't keep moving on from corruption, because every time you do, it grows stronger. Here's what they'll never admit. The real threat to national security isn't foreign. It's internal. It's the culture of secrecy, of manipulation, moral compromise disguised as patriotism. And you know why this matters right now? Because if they can hide one failure, they can hide them all. They can rewrite history in real time. Most people won't even notice. That's not democracy. That's deception with a flag on it. So ask yourself, who benefits when truth becomes a threat? Who gains when questions are forbidden? The people in charge of the narrative, not the people living with the consequences. That's why you're not supposed to ask. That's why they call it conspiracy when it's really just curiosity. But the truth doesn't belong to them. It belongs to you. And if the system can't survive your questions, maybe it shouldn't survive at all, because real strength comes from truth, not control. You start to realize something unsettling when you look closely. Every time a secret mission fails, the pattern is the same. Deny, distract, and deflect. The people who planned it vanish into the background, and the narrative machine kicks in. You're told it was a complicated situation, that mistakes were made, and somehow it's always too sensitive to discuss. Convenient, isn't it? A government agency can make catastrophic errors, risk lives, destabilize regions, and then simply declare it classified. That's not accountability, that's theater. And the actors aren't random. They're professionals trained to protect the institution, not the people it's supposed to serve. This is where it becomes disturbing. The CIA's failures don't exist in isolation. They ripple, they affect global trust, alliances, economies, even how citizens perceive their own government. Every time a covert operation collapses, it doesn't just undermine credibility abroad, it fractures faith at home. Ordinary Americans begin to suspect, and rightly so, that they're being told half-truths. And half-truths over time are just lies in disguise. You can't build a nation on deception, yet that's exactly what's happening. The deeper you look, the more you see how secrecy has become policy. When the truth becomes dangerous, it's not because it threatens security, it's because it threatens power. And power hates exposure, because exposure means you might ask, who authorized this? Who benefited? Who paid the price? Those questions terrify bureaucracies more than any foreign adversary ever could, because those questions strip away the illusion of control. They show you that the ones making decisions aren't infallible strategists. They're human beings with egos, incentives, and agendas. And when those agendas collide with truth, truth always loses. Unless, of course, people refuse to look away. Think about what this means on a global scale. Failed intelligence operations don't just tarnish America's image, they embolden adversaries. They make allies question loyalty. They send a message that our leadership is unstable, distracted, and driven more by politics than principle. The result, a world that trusts America less and fears its unpredictability more. That's dangerous, not because it makes us weak, but because it makes the world chaotic. And chaos is fertile ground for manipulation. Every shadowy failure becomes propaganda fuel for regimes that thrive on America's mistakes. Now, here's where the spin becomes almost insulting. They'll tell you this mission was necessary, that without it, the threat level would have risen. They always say that. Ask yourself, if every failure is justified by an invisible threat, when do we ever see victory? When does the secrecy end? The truth is, secrecy has become the shield behind which incompetence hides. Every cover-up, every redacted report, every closed-door hearing, it's all part of the same machinery designed to keep you compliant. Because if you knew what really happened, if you understood how decisions were made and by whom, you'd realize the problem isn't foreign enemies, it's internal decay. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The CIA's greatest weapon isn't technology or espionage, it's narrative control. They can fail spectacularly and still convince half the country it was a success. That's not intelligence, that's manipulation. And manipulation works best when the public stops questioning. That's why they've conditioned you to accept failure as complexity. It's not complex, it's corrupt. You don't need a classified briefing to see that. You just need the courage to ask what they're trying so hard to hide. You start noticing something strange when you track the aftermath of these so-called covert operations. Every time they fail, the fallout doesn't hit the people who planned it. It hits ordinary citizens. That's the quiet truth they never put in press releases. When a mission collapses, it's not the CIA director who loses his job. It's not the think tank strategists who lose credibility. It's the people on the ground, the soldiers, the agents, the locals who trusted America's word. They pay the price while those responsible get promoted. That's not governance. That's a rigged system where failure at the top is rewarded and consequences are outsourced downward. And the excuse is always the same. We didn't have full intelligence. Really? Then why did you act in the dark? Because the mission was never about truth. It was about control, optics, and maintaining a narrative that the U.S. intelligence apparatus is infallible, even when the evidence screams otherwise. When governments refuse to admit mistakes, they create a culture where deceit becomes standard procedure. You can't reform a system that won't recognize its own rot. The CIA doesn't just hide information from the public. It hides it from itself. That's why history keeps repeating. Think about it. Every decade, a critical operation gone wrong, another region destabilized, another generation disillusioned. Yet the playbook never changes. Deny involvement, blame the chaos on bad intel. then quietly reclassify the files. It's a cycle of denial so polished it almost looks professional. But beneath the surface, there's something far darker. The institutional belief that the public can't handle the truth. That's the core arrogance of power. Because if you believe citizens are too fragile to know what's being done in their name, you're not serving them, you're ruling them. Now consider how this culture of secrecy erodes national integrity. You can't lead the world when your credibility is hollow. The entire foundation of democracy rests on transparency, but transparency dies when intelligence agencies operate as states within the state. Every secret operation gone wrong is a fracture in public trust, and the fracture spreads. People stop believing official reports. They start questioning everything, and for good reason. Because once deception becomes policy, nothing can be trusted. That's not paranoia, that's logic. You can't ask citizens to believe in institutions that repeatedly betray their faith and expect compliance without resentment. And here's where it gets even more insidious. Every failure is followed by a public relations campaign. Leaks appear in friendly media outlets painting the agency as misunderstood heroes. They're never villains, always victims of circumstance. It's brilliant in a sinister way, because if you control the story, you control perception. Perception is all that matters in modern governance. The mission might have failed, lives might have been lost, regions might have burned. But if the media sells the right narrative, the agency walks away untarnished. That's the real operation. Not espionage, not defense. Storytelling, crafting illusions so convincing that even failure looks like necessity. So ask yourself, when was the last time anyone in power stood up and said, "We got it wrong"? You can't remember, can you? Because accountability died the moment secrecy became the default. And without accountability, truth becomes irrelevant. When truth is irrelevant, democracy turns into theater. The kind where you clap for performances that cost real people their futures. This isn't cynicism, it's observation. You can't build trust on classified lies. You can't keep pretending that every broken promise is patriotic strategy. At some point, you either confront the deception or become complicit in it. What happens when secrecy stops being a tool of protection and becomes a weapon of manipulation? You start seeing patterns, not random accidents, deliberate engineering of narratives. Every time a mission goes sideways, the official story emerges polished, sanitized, and perfectly timed. It's never "we miscalculated," it's unforeseen complexities. The language itself is a shield, bureaucratic, phrasing designed to dull outrage, to blur responsibility. That's not transparency, that's theater. And the actors, highly paid officials who've mastered the art of pretending ignorance. They call it national security, but what they really mean is you don't need to know. Because if you did, you might ask questions they can't answer without collapsing the fa-aid. The deeper you look, the more you realize every layer of this system exists to protect itself, not the public. You have agencies conducting covert missions, then other agencies investigating them, and still others controlling what information ever sees daylight. It's not oversight, it's insulation, a labyrinth of plausible deniability. So no one at the top ever has to say, "Yes, authorize that." That's the genius or the sickness, depending on how you view it. The result is a structure where truth is a liability, where honesty threatens careers, and where the only sin is getting caught. So when a mission fails, the conversation isn't what went wrong, it's how do we spin this? The people you think are protecting you are busy protecting themselves. That's not security, that's survival. But let's go further. Imagine the cultural cost of this kind of systemic dishonesty. When you live in a world where every official statement is filtered, every image curated, every story framed, reality itself starts to dissolve. You don't know what's true anymore. And when truth disappears, control becomes easy, because confused people don't resist, they comply. That's the unspoken goal, not to inform, but to exhaust, to wear the public down with complexity until they stop caring. Because apathy is the ultimate victory. It means you've accepted the illusion. And once you accept it, they can do anything: fund wars in secret, topple governments, rewrite history. You'll nod along because the story sounds familiar. You've heard it before from them. Now think about the ripple effect. Every time they deceive, they weaken the bond between citizen and state. You can't love a system that keeps lying to you. You can't trust an institution that never tells you the full story, and yet they depend on your belief in their competence, their morality, their necessity. The great irony is that the more they lie to protect national interests, the more they destroy the very trust that makes those interests possible. A nation divided by deception cannot stand united in crisis. When the truth finally surfaces, and it always does, people don't just lose faith in a mission. They lose faith in everything. That's the real cost, not the failed operation, not the wasted billions, but the erosion of belief. So when you see leaders deflect, when you hear phrases like, for your safety, remember this, they're not hiding secrets from enemies, they're hiding them from you. Because the greatest threat to their power isn't exposure to foreign adversaries, it's exposure to the truth. And the moment the truth breaks through, everything they built on deception begins to crumble. Isn't it strange how every time something goes wrong, the people responsible seem to vanish behind layers of committees, agencies, and official jargon? There's always a report, heavily redacted, full of technical phrases that mean nothing, and a spokesperson who tells you protocols were followed. But no one ever answers the real question, who made the call? Because if you trace it back far enough, you realize it's never just one person. It's a network, a system designed to disperse blame so thinly that no one can be held accountable. That's not by accident. That's the architecture of modern power. Responsibility has been replaced by procedure. As long as the right boxes were checked, the truth doesn't matter. They tell you this is about national interest, but what they really mean is self-preservation. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes secrecy is currency. It's how they maintain control. When information is limited, perception becomes everything. They don't need to be right, they just need to look right. So they craft narratives, they leak stories selectively, they use trusted journalists as mouthpieces. And by the time the facts come out, if they ever do, the public has already moved on. It's a game of attention. Whoever controls the spotlight controls the truth. And right now, that spotlight is owned by the same people who created the mess in the first place. And yet they tell us we're paranoid for asking questions. They say skepticism is dangerous. Think about that. Questioning power, the very essence of democracy, is now framed as a threat. It's not ignorance they fear, it's awareness. Because awareness leads to accountability. And accountability is the one thing this system cannot survive. That's why they distract you with drama, divide you with outrage, and bury you under noise. If you're busy arguing about headlines, you'll never notice the machinery operating behind the scenes. That's the strategy. Not to silence you completely, but to overwhelm you into submission. But here's the uncomfortable part. This isn't just a failure of government. It's a failure of all of us. We've allowed complexity to replace clarity. We've accepted official statements as truth, not realizing they're carefully engineered to avoid it. Every time we shrug and move on, every time we choose comfort over confrontation, we reinforce the very system that deceives us. The powerful don't fear outrage, they fear persistence. Outrage fades, persistence investigates, persistence remembers, and memory is the one thing propaganda can't erase. So when another classified story breaks, when another mission fails, another secret emerges, ask yourself, who benefits from your confusion? Who gains when you stop caring? Because that's the end game. It's not about hiding one operation or one truth. It's about teaching you not to look, to believe that some things are too complex for ordinary people to understand, but they're not. Complexity is camouflage. Once you see that, once you strip away the language, the layers, the excuses, what's left is simple, a handful of people making decisions that shape millions of lives without consequence, without transparency, and without consent. You start to realize something when you look at the pattern. It's not random. Every leak, every cover up, every half-truth. It fits together like a puzzle that someone never wanted you to finish. Because once you see the full picture, it's impossible to unsee it. The people who claim to protect democracy are the ones quietly manipulating it. The agencies designed for national security have become tools of selective power. They decide what you know, what you don't and how you should feel about it. They call it intelligence. I call it influence. It's not about gathering facts anymore. It's about shaping belief. And when belief replaces truth, you no longer have freedom. You have management. You're being managed through headlines, through fear, through repetition. Look around. We're living in an age of curated reality. You're told what's important, what's urgent, what's acceptable to discuss. And if you step outside that frame, even slightly, you're labeled a conspiracy theorist, a danger, a problem. But here's the irony. The very institutions calling for transparency are the ones hiding behind classified walls. They say they act in your best interest, but you're never invited to see the evidence. You're told to trust them blindly. That's not democracy. That's faith in bureaucracy. And bureaucracies don't have morals. They have procedures that protect themselves first. And when those procedures fail, you pay the price in rights, in truth, in trust. So what do? Because cynicism isn't a strategy. Complaining doesn't change systems. What changes systems is clarity. Real change begins when people stop accepting polished statements and start demanding proof. When you refuse to let the story end where they want it to. When you trace every claim, question every motive, follow every inconsistency until the whole thing collapses under the weight of its own lies. That's how power is reclaimed, not with noise, but with precision. The truth is, this isn't about one mission or one agency. It's about the principle that governs all of it, accountability. Without it, no democracy can stand. Because when power hides, corruption thrives. And when corruption thrives, freedom becomes an illusion. The only reason they get away with it is because they've convinced you that you can't do anything, that you're too small, too busy, too distracted. But the truth is, awareness is contagious. One person asking questions becomes 10, 10 become 100, and 100 voices demanding truth. That's not noise, that's a movement. So here's the bottom line. The cover up isn't just the crime, it's the culture. It's the habit of deception that's crept into every corner of our institutions. And until we expose it, until we remind those in power that they answer to the people, not the other way around, this cycle will continue. You want to fix it. Start with one simple act. Don't look away. Don't accept vague answers. Don't settle for narratives. Demand truth loudly, relentlessly, unapologetically, because the moment the public stops asking, the powerful stop answering. And when that happens, freedom doesn't die with a bang. It fades in silence. The CIA's secret mission gone wrong isn't just a story about espionage. It's a reflection of what happens when institutions believe they're untouchable. It's a reminder that the truth always finds a way out, no matter how deep it's buried. The time for blind trust is over. The time for awareness, vigilance, and action is now. Tucker Carlson. And if you care about freedom, start by asking the questions they told you not to ask.